What's up everyone, welcome to Workshop Rebuild. In today's episode, I'll be giving you guys an update on the John Deere 300 garden tractor, and I'll start up for the first time, so stick around. Made some serious progress over here on the John Deere 300. I've dropped in the engine, added a whole bunch of wiring with a separate dash panel, and I added the fuel tank as well. And I'll share with you guys that update right now. The John Deere 300 currently looks like this. In the middle, we have a whole bunch of wiring, and we have the choke as well as the throttle cable down below. Up front is the Kohler K341 AQS. Yes, I do say that a lot, but that's just the model of this engine. Everything is assembled on the engine, so I can start it up for the first time. I removed the drive shaft in between the pump and the engine. I do not want the pump to turn while I tune this engine for the first time, because I might be revving it a little bit higher and lower and adjusting the governor and the carburetor over here on this side, and I just don't want the pump to work while I tune in the engine over here. So what did I do? I took the engine and I dropped it in on all four engine mounts. There are two in the back and two up front. We will be adding the bolts later on, but since I do not have the drive shaft, I plan on taking this out once more after everything is tuned up. After I dropped in the engine, I went ahead and had a look at the governor linkage because I added the choke and the throttle cable. On the throttle cable, the linkage from the governor to the throttle was very loose on this point right here. So what I did, I went ahead and I 3D printed a little bushing which will hold the rod and the linkage over here. And now when I move it back and forth, there's basically no movement in this joint here. So that's very important. I do not want any sloppiness from the governor to the throttle, or else I'll have a whole bunch of issues just to get this fine-tuned. After the governor was set up, I went ahead, added this spring down below, and it mounts actually to the back lever, and this is our throttle cable which goes down below. This is just set up so I can adjust it by hand while I set it up. The second cable over here is the choke, hooks up right here on the lever. This lever is a 90-degree lever, and this little rod right here I bent myself. I still might change this because it's a little bit too thin for my liking. I think this is 2 millimeters, and I would like it to be 3, that I don't have this slop right down here. I don't really like that, because when I pull on the choke cable, I want it to react, and I want it to react properly. But I'll show you guys how this works right here. So I have the choke cable. It's currently closed, but when I push it down, it's open. And now I can show you from this angle. So when I pull on it right here, that choke will close, which is on, and then when you push it in, that should be open on the carburetor. So right there, everything is working fine. And I'll share with you guys the throttle cable as well. So I'll bring this up here so you guys can see it. When I push down, it'll activate the throttle. Sorry, that fell on my hand. And when I push it back, it'll go back to an idle. The throttle goes over the governor to the carburetor. So we're gonna have to do adjusting there once everything is up and running. After the engine and the throttle and the choke cable were installed, I went ahead and had a look at the wiring. I set up this separate dash panel. This is not the one that I will be installing, but it is the one from the parts John Deere 317. So I have the amp meter right here. I have the PTO switch. I have the light switch, and the wiring harness has been cleaned beforehand, but I still have to make sure that everything functions the way it should. Over here, I have the ignition switch, and over here, I have the solenoid. So I will be hooking up the positive to the top of the solenoid. Once the key is turned over, the power will get distributed all the way over here to the starter. So everything seems to be right over there. And there are 2 more wires that come off to this side. I have the green wire and the pink wire, which are right here. I believe the green one goes to the coil, and the red one or the pink one goes to the stator. That's how I think it's set up. The wiring harness is basically the same on the John Deere 317. I'll leave a card up above so you guys can view the wiring of this garden tractor over here. After that, we have a whole bunch of yellow wires, which are for the lights. We have the neutral switch over here, which activates your neutral or park, which allows you to start the machine. So I will have to activate this in order to start it. In the back, the two pink wires lead to the seat switch. I have this makeshift seat switch right here. It's just the male and female version, or male and female connector, and on the end of that I just hot wired them. So that's not the seat switch, but we just put the wires together so we can start it. I won't be needing the yellow wire for the startup. So I believe everything on the John Deere 300 is ready for an initial startup. I will need fuel, which goes to the fuel pump. For that, I will be using a bottle because I have the fuel hose right here, which comes from the fuel tank, but I might have to reroute it because there's not enough room where I previously installed it. So I'm gonna have to make sure that that fuel hose comes somewhere out here, but I will be using a bottle in today's video for the startup. Over on this side is the dipstick. I do not have the dipstick, so there's a little issue. I will have to make my own little dipstick and just get the proper measurement for the oil. And that's where I'll bring you guys to the table so we can have an update on the dipstick. Over here on the table, I have a dipstick from a Kohler K341. This is supposedly not the right length of dipstick, and it's not the right shape on the top. I have this little cap, which came with the John Deere 300, but it somehow didn't fit. So what I did, I added an O-ring on the inside, and I believe with this, once it's on here, I can makeshift a dipstick just for the time being. I got the dipstick cap in place, and with the O-ring, it's very tight. Like I'd have to, yeah, as you guys can see, the O-ring fell out too, but it's very tight on the dipstick tube. Now, the only thing that I have to make is the dipstick itself. From the inside surface over here, it should be 14 inches. And the Kohler K341 dipstick is only 11 inches. So this is not long enough. I'm gonna have to make something a little bit longer than this just for today's startup. So we'll see what I can make. I give you guys an update on the John Deere 300 frame. It's looking already much better for the initial startup now, and I can finally tune the engine after that. I got some work done off camera. I painted the panels green, and I did some work to a dash panel, which was a separate dash panel to mount the hour meter as well, which I will have on this John Deere 300. I'm also working on some other things behind the scenes, so I'll share with you guys that. And if you guys like the content you're seeing, please hit that like button down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and as always, stick around. Right here on the table, I have the hood laid out and the instrumental panel. The hood has already been assembled with the front light. Everything is cleaned up, and the inside of this has been painted silver, so that will give a nicer shine. On the instrumental panel, I added the serial number once again with the two rivets, and I added the dash. The dash has been modified in a way that I like it personally. The symbols and meanings throughout this dash have been painted yellow with an oil-based marker. For me personally, it turned out very nice. After that was done, I 3D printed this bezel around the cutout, which makes a nice statement around the hour meter as well. The hour meter has 1 hour on it currently, so this rebuilt engine will have 1 hour on it officially. This will be the instrumental panel and dash panel I will be installing in the near future. For test purposes, I will be using what I have right here. This is just a standard dash. As you can see, nothing has been done to it, but it still looks pretty nice and it's in good condition. This could be also converted to the dash panel you guys just saw. I shared with you guys what I'm doing behind the scenes with all the panels and the dash, and I shared with you guys the base frame in its current state. So let's give this engine its first startup, which it deserves after the complete rebuild. So stick around. I have everything set up for the initial startup. I have the battery laying on the other side. The starter solenoid has positive. we have power through the amp meter, so everything seems to be functioning properly. Now to turn over the starter, the last thing I have to do is activate the neutral switch. I just taped it off over here on the switch, so now I can go ahead and turn over the engine. I did not add fuel yet. The fuel is still right here in the bottle. I will add this very soon, but I'm gonna turn over the engine just a couple times so the oil can splash around inside for the initial startup, and then I'll go ahead and add fuel so we can get this thing running and dialed in. So I turned over the engine a couple times and I think that's good enough. I don't want to burn the starter. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach the bottle to the fuel pump. After that, hopefully we get fuel within the carburetor and then it should fire up for the first time. Okay, started up for the first time, but I didn't add any nuts to these engine mount bolts, and I don't think that was the smartest option, so I'll get some nuts on those bolts and we'll try it again. I just opened up the windows and doors so I can run the engine a little bit longer. That will give me time to fine-tune the carburetor. I added a bit more fuel to the bottle so it doesn't run out on fuel, and I bolted down the engine with 3 bolts. I didn't find the 4th one, but that should be better than before. So let's start it once more. Right here is like an idle speed, so I'll see what I can adjust. That right there was the second startup of the Kohler engine on the John Deere 300. Everything seemed to work perfectly. The ignition coil condenser, points, the spark plug, the fuel pump, everything was working just fine the way it should. So you guys saw it on the video. It was smoking a bit. That is normal after you do an engine rebuild. There's a whole bunch of assembly lube, there's extra oil within the engine, so it's going to smoke for the first couple minutes. After that, it should just go away. The fuel pump is pulling the fuel the way it should, so I know the fuel pump is working. And it's also not dumping the fuel back into the bottle, so that means the vacuum is working the way it should. I'm really satisfied with this rebuild. It just worked right off the bat. The carburetor didn't need much adjustment straight out the box. I will adjust it later on. I will not rev this engine over 3/4 throttle because everything is new. The piston rings, the valves have just been lapped, so I really want to take it easy on this engine for the first couple of hours. I'd say probably 5 to 10 hours. After that, I'm gonna rev it a little bit higher, and then if I need to do some more adjustment, I'll do that later on. So now I can go ahead and pull off this engine, assemble the drive shaft, put the engine back in, and then we'll hopefully have a running tractor and driving tractor here very soon.